So those are some of the socio-psychological approaches and theories to looking at how we do conversations. You'll notice, as we heard, there's a lot of cause-effect thinking going on in them. They're trying to figure out what variables count and how if you change one thing it affects the other. And now we'll turn to some cybernetic research on conversations. So the cybernetic tradition is, again, interested in how people process information they receive during conversations. So you're listening to a conversation, you're processing things in your brain. It's interested in learning how multiple issues influence how we process, not simply isolating variables, not just cause-effect relationships, but it's looking at those cyclical or patterned processes that we get during conversations. So it's not a linear cause-effect, it's much more of a web or a network way of thinking about our interactions and looking at patterns and how those patterns develop. So coordinated management of meaning, which is often called CMM for short, there was a period of communication research where you had to have a 3-letter abbreviation for your theory or nobody took it seriously. So this is during that time. CMM is the way people normally refer to it. But the coordinated management of meaning theory says that miscommunication is really the norm in our conversations. So if you look at most conversations, people are working hard to understand each other because they don't start the conversation understanding each other. And so while we normally think of miscommunication as something bad or something to avoid, like, oh, we had a miscommunication, the coordinated management of meaning people say, well, we start in a place of miscommunication, and the whole point of communication is to coordinate our meanings. So our communication is fundamentally about the negotiation or creation of shared meaning. It's not about how clearly we talk and how concisely we talk. And so the term negotiation is not so much about some kind of bargain, like I'll give you $10 if you give me that pair of running shoes. What it means is there's that back and forth interaction where we navigate or figure out what our shared meaning is together. We create it together. We work it out together. So that's the word negotiate. It doesn't mean bargaining in this sense. And there are different layers through which we view and understand our communication that either helps us coordinate that meaning and create shared meaning, or there are ways that it routinely gets messy and that we don't achieve that shared meaning and we stay in a place of miscommunication. So let's look at these 5. The first one is the speech act. And as we've mentioned, in any conversation, you say something. You have an utterance that comes out of your mouth. And if we were to type it out, it would be the words on the page. That's the speech act. You actually say something. Some event happened where people talk to each other. And sometimes the words themselves might get people confused. And maybe it is not said in a way that makes much sense to begin with. However, the speech act is itself, that isolated act of uttering something, uttering some words, is probably not the thing that most of us have difficulty with. The second one is the episode. The episode is a fascinating layer of interpretation that I find is one of the most common ways that we misunderstand each other. So the episode is simply a framework for what we view of this is that this conversation is doing. For example, if I am having a joking episode, that would be the episode, the frame. I'm joking around, right? So I'm playing, I'm being playful with my words, I'm having fun. I might start teasing somebody, right? You say, oh yeah, you're just like that because it's that. And it's a teasing, joking episode. However, if they think of the interaction as criticism, they're saying, oh, he's criticizing me, then they're going to interpret everything I say through that frame, through that mindset, and they're going to take my words very differently than I meant them. This often happens in my marriage. I grew up in a home with an older brother and a younger brother, 3 boys, no sisters, and we were constantly giving each other a hard time. But when we gave each other a hard time, as guys, it was actually a way of bonding and hanging out. It was like you make fun of each other, and I know it sounds dysfunctional, but in my house, when you're goofing around and making fun of each other and teasing, it actually was one of the ways you displayed that you were close. In fact, I would only ever, to this day, tease somebody and joke around with them like that, with a little bit of sharpness to it. I would only do that with someone that I actually really liked. I would only do it with a good friend. I would only do it with one of my brothers, and we still do it to each other. And it's not meant in a mean-hearted way at all, mean-spirited way at all. It's meant to show that, look, we're close enough so that we can trade these barbs in a fun way. My wife, in contrast, grew up in a home with all sisters, and she didn't have any brothers, and they didn't do any teasing. They didn't do that. And so when I first met my wife, when we first got married, I would say little jokey things, and really, I don't think I know they were not mean-spirited at all. I was just kind of goofing around, playing, just trying to push her buttons and get her going a little bit. And she would say to me, gosh, why are you being so mean? And I said, well, I'm not being mean. I'm just horsing around. I'm just having some fun. And she didn't appreciate that. We had totally different frameworks or episodes for what was happening in that moment. She thought it was criticism. I thought it was horsing around. And so I don't do that anymore. We had total miscommunication about what was happening. It's not that she didn't understand the words I said. It's she didn't understand the interpretive episode that I was in. I was also one time out with a female friend. This is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away when I was still single, before I ever met my wife. And I was out with a friend. I saw her at school. We would hang out. And I said, hey, there's this band playing. We both wanted to check out this band, this live band. And I really didn't think anything of it. I didn't assume it was a romantic situation. It was the first time we had really hung out outside of campus setting. And so I just thought, who knows where this is going? I'm just friends with her right now. And I haven't said otherwise, and neither is she. And then on the drive home, we were driving home after seeing the band, and I had a stick shift, so I shifted the gears, and I left my hand there, and I left my hand there for a split second, and then she put her hand on top of my hand. And I know this might sound a little old-fashioned, but I was actually pretty shocked. I was like, whoa, like, what is she doing? This is so personal. And again, my episode was we were hanging out as friends, and so this was a shock. Her episode, apparently, for the whole night was we were on a date. So everything that was happening was interpreted through two different frameworks. Another layer is relationship, and that is you have a specific relationship with that person, and depending on what is said and done, it's either going to be consistent in your view of what that relationship is or should be, or inconsistent. And so within a relationship, you understand what the other person means. So, for example, I know some people that can say something. I have close relationships with some people. They can say just about anything to me, and I'm not going to get offended because I know they love me. I know they're my friend, and if they're saying something that needs to be said, well, it might not feel great, but I am going to hear it, right? I'm going to listen to them because I respect them. I have a relationship with them. However, if a stranger came up to me and said something harsh like that, a criticism, I would react very differently. The relationship matters in terms of how you receive and understand information. It also matters in terms of how you make sense of it. If my brother, I'm very close with my older and younger brother, and if my older brother said something to me, I would hear it. But if a new person I just met said something to me, I might think to myself, who do you think you are? You don't even really know me that well, and you think you can give me that kind of feedback? So the relationship changes the way we understand the situation, the communication. Our local culture obviously is going to change things. Certain things are very funny in some cultures, and other cultures they're not. Certain things are appropriate in some cultures, others are not. Down south, for example, if someone says, hey, you should really come by sometime to the house and visit, they don't mean it. They don't want you to come by. And in fact, if you showed up at their house having just been invited, they would be horrified. and it took me a little while to know. My wife and I used to live down south, and people would say, "Oh, you should come over sometime." And my wife and I, who did not grow up in the South, would say, "Oh, that sounds great. When?" And they would never commit. They would be like, "Whoa, whoa," and they would act as if we were being pushy. So they didn't really mean it. To them, "You should come over sometime" was just another way in that culture of saying, "We're friends. Nice to see you. Let's, hopefully we'll see each other again." But the invitation was not a genuine invitation. It was just the same way as asking someone, "How are you? How are you doing?" You don't want to necessarily know their whole medical history, but it took us a while in that Southern culture to understand that that's what it meant. And the last one on the list is identity. Identity is, again, how you see yourself. It's a lot like that term face that we used earlier. If you see yourself in a certain way, that is going to change how you understand the things that people say to you. You might get a little bent out of shape if someone says something in a certain way, or you might feel great if someone says something a certain way. I remember one time I was talking to someone who was a teacher, and I said something about them being a good teacher, and boy, they just lit up the room with their smile. They were so happy that what I said confirmed their identity and how they saw themselves. And so you, depending on how you see yourself, that could change how you understand the communication that's going on. And remember, there are two people involved here, so both people have an identity, and both people are filtering what they're hearing and what they're saying through that identity. I have someone that really believes they're a friend of mine, and this person really believes that they are like a teacher, and this is a different person. It's not the same person. And so they feel it's their responsibility to tell everybody around them what to do, and that is their identity. I do not primarily see myself as a student of that person, and so they constantly try to tell me what to do and how I should live my life, and I'm always like, okay, thanks, but I don't remember asking for this consistent advice about how I should live my life. I do have people I go to for advice. This person doesn't happen to be one of them, but they really see themselves as this person that is supposed to be a life coach or a teacher or something to everybody, and so that causes a lot of miscommunication, if you will. They don't have necessarily coordinated meaning or shared meaning with the people around them. So these are five of the ways that we can either sync up, or 5 of the layers that might cause some confusion in our relationships. There's also, in part of CMM, is interaction loops. And this is that cyclical cybernetic type flavor here. We have strange loops in our conversations, or undesirable repetitive patterns. That's the URP. Sometimes people just call them an ERP. We have ERPs in our relationships. An ERP is a interaction pattern that you get into that neither people want to be in. For example, maybe someone is no good at, maybe you're in a relationship with someone who's no good at writing papers, and so you start helping them with their papers, and the more you help them with their papers, the more they ask, and now you're writing their papers. That's an undesirable repetitive pattern, because the truth is this person doesn't want to be bad at writing papers. They wish they were better, but they're not going to get any better if someone else is writing that paper. But by you continuing to write their papers for them, now you don't want to be in that situation either, and you're not really helping. You actually, another classic one that's a little more serious is alcohol. And there's usually one alcoholic in a relationship and one enabler. An enabler is essentially the person that helps the other person, the drinker, keep things enough together, just together enough, if you will, to make it to their job and to not get in any serious trouble. So the enabler might help make excuses for them when they're late, or might help them get them out of bed and quickly make them a breakfast. And the enabler helps keep their life together, but also, as a consequence, helps keep them hooked on alcohol and thinking that it's not really as big of a problem as it is. And neither people really benefit from this. It's an undesirable repetitive pattern. There's almost always some kind of enabler. I often wonder, that you've probably seen on television, there's people that they have gotten so huge because they've eaten so much that they can't get out of their house. They can't fit through the door. They can't even walk anymore. It's actually kind of sad. You see this once in a while on television or on the internet. And it's kind of bums me out. I'm feeling sad for the person that they're in this position, but I'm also thinking, hey, wait a second. If you can't even leave the room, then who is bringing you food to make you weigh 900 pounds? There's an enabler here, right? And now this person is out there buying them chickens and pizzas and burgers. And so what's going on in that? That's an undesirable repetitive pattern. Another one might be let's say you get up to do a presentation and your significant other is in the class and you act a little nervous during your presentation. Then after the presentation, the person says to you, geez, why'd you look so nervous? You got to calm down up there. And then you're thinking, my goodness, I guess I looked really nervous. So then the next time you get up to present, you feel even more nervous because now you're realizing that people can tell you're nervous. And then you sit down from your presentation and the significant other again says, my gosh, you look worse every single time. What's going on? You've got to get it together. You look so nervous up there. And that just makes you more nervous and so forth. It's undesirable repetitive pattern. A charmed loop is just the opposite. A charmed loop is where you have a positive feedback loop, where each person is quite happy with the direction of this cycle. So let's just take the public speaking example. Let's say you give a great presentation and your teacher or a friend says, you know, you're really a pretty good presenter. Keep working at that because I really see that as an area of strength for you in the future. Then you might think, wow, this is good. I'll look for opportunities to present. That person really thinks I'm good at this. And then you look for opportunities to present and you feel confident. And then you look confident and everybody thinks you did a great job. And then they pat you on the back afterward. And they say, hey, great work. And then you feel a little bit more confident. And so that's an example of a charmed loop. There is recent research on marriages that came from a Canadian professor, I believe it was. And they found that husbands who did more housework, cleaning up, I'll use a substitute word here, were more likely to have romance, so to speak, in their relationship with their wife. And so these guys, these husbands, figured out that it was in everybody's best interest, again a charmed loop, if they did some dishes and they did some vacuuming. Because then everybody ended up happy and romantic, so to speak. And there are probably really good reasons why when they dug into the research, because the wives felt like they were part of a team and they weren't alone in the housework. The wives also felt like that showed love. The husband was showing that the wife love, and so she felt so happy about that she picked the right guy. And it also reduced a lot of stress in the home because let's say the mom comes home, let's say it's a mom and she's home and everything's a mess. She feels stressed. She's not thinking about her husband. She's thinking about how stressed she is. Or she comes home from work and everything's clean and she feels happy about that. So there's a charmed loop element to these examples that show that there's a way to interact with the people around you that can lead to a positive feedback loop. And so this is part of coordinated management of meaning. And when things are in a charmed loop, obviously they're coordinated in a way that everybody's pretty happy with.